Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, the Enterprise Design Framework, an alternate approach to define challenges, scope, and frame initiatives. I'm your host, Liva Randerbasson, and on behalf of IIBA, thanks for joining us today. Today's webinar is a public event. It is designed to deliver practical resources for you as you continue to hone your skill set and deliver value within your organization. When you join IIBA, you become a member of an international association dedicated to developing and promoting the business analysis profession, with access to resources and community to support your development and career growth. At IIBA, we're all about uniting a community of professionals to create better business outcomes and to provide the tools to help you climb the ladder of success. And today we are here to do just that. Today, we're very pleased to have Milan Guenther, founding partner of the Enterprise Design Associates, EDA. EDA is a European strategic design consultancy created in 2009. Milan has a rather mixed background, graduated in communication design and holding an MBA specializing in business information systems. Having worked as a freelancer for most of his professional life, he touched the many areas related to experience design, branding, and enterprise architecture, and has been a popular speaker on international conferences on this subject. He is living in the beautiful city of Paris, or wherever his project might take him. We're very pleased to have him present today. Please welcome Milan.
Hello everyone. Thanks, Liva, for having me. All right, so let's get started. So I'm going to talk about the Enterprise Design Framework, which is a toolkit that we have developed to support innovation and transformation practice in organizations. It is part of a growing discipline that we see growing worldwide. So I'm a partner at EDA. I'm based in Paris. We have two more partners in our very small core organization, one in Berlin and one in Düsseldorf. We are all about bridging the gap between strategy and execution. And as you see here, this is basically the logo of our company. And you see sometimes there's a rather big gap. So everything I'm going to talk about today is can be seen in this slide. It is there to bridge this gap, to bridge our thinking with our doing. Okay, so our organization is mostly in Europe, but we have a global ambition. So we are working as a network of change agents in enterprises, so in large organizations, also small organizations, consultancies, freelance designers. We do basically four things. We work a lot in workshops and co-creation sessions. I'm going to share about one core component of the framework, which is the Enterprise Design Sprint. It's a design sprint similar to the one developed in Google Ventures and also put forward by Google, but adapted to systems of complexity like enterprises. We are running this global network of people who want to become enterprise designers, who are enterprise designers. That being said, in order to do enterprise design, it's actually not necessary to call yourself an enterprise designer. You can perfectly well be an enterprise architect, business analyst, service designer, and do enterprise design. We work very visually. So another component I'm going to talk about is the enterprise design modeling language. All of this is part of this one toolbox that we are developing with our community of practitioners worldwide. When I say worldwide, you see here this map, and it's kind of zoomed on Europe. So we are mostly based in Europe, also the network. We have enterprise practitioners, we have partners which are service providers doing enterprise design in client engagements and doing trainings. And we have our core team kind of dispersed. But you see here also we have a few dots appearing now on the other continents. So growing worldwide. And we are always looking to welcome new members who want to do enterprise design and want to do innovation and transformation practice in their environments. So if you feel, especially after watching this webinar, that might be you, please click this link, also share the slides. Just a few logos. So we do not really in our network look at one particular industry or organizational or kind of organization. So we have public, private, large and small, different industries, different backgrounds, startups, corporate collaboration, and so on. Because the approach is rather universal, it can be applied to many environments. This is the first of for now, two-part series, depending on what kind of discussion we get after I present it, might be even more. But there's already a next webinar scheduled for the 5th of November, where Andrew Turner from IIBA UK will join me. And we are going to talk about how the stuff that I'm talking about today relates to the BABOK, what is overlapping, what is different, how to use them together. So if you're interested in that, please also pencil it into your calendar. And also, we are running a conference every year called Intersection. This year's edition is in Prague on the 6th and 7th of September. And if you use the code XFriend10, you get 10% off as a IIBA follower or member. Yeah, our theme this year is scaling ambitious endeavors. The program is already live, and yeah, would be cool if you could join us. So when we use the term enterprise design, we often run into some misconception of what we might mean. People think enterprise refers mostly to large and boring and cubicle and IT and expensive, and all of these things are kind of what we see as symptoms of badly designed enterprises. So a few months ago, we were thinking about what actually happens if you don't design your enterprise, and we came up with this concept of end-org. If you follow the enterprise architecture work, you know their tag is end-arg. So end-org is enterprise awkwardness. There's a bot. If you find enterprise awkwardness, like the examples that I'm going to share, you can tweet about it, and the end-org bot will retweet you if you tag it with end-org. End-org kind of appears like this. Enterprises tell you your call is very important to them, but then they make you wait. When you finally get through, they don't remember who you are. They make you shift between different personalities. This, by the way, is Comic Sans is a font that designers like a lot because it is kind of a fake human font, and you often find it in enterprises, in organizations, especially in the bathroom, saying you should leave it as you want to find it and things like that. Enterprise awkwardness can render like this, where you have actually a graphic designer implementing a style guide, in this case for the annual report of Thomson Reuters. And if you read it as a Venn diagram, then it becomes funny. And this happens when many people are involved. There's not a lot of coordination. There's kind of not one mind. The enterprise is not acting as one organism with one mind, and then it can have funny results. And this also is visible in trends. Jerry McGovern put together statistics on who do we trust as human beings, and we see that trust is rapidly declining in organizations being companies, government agencies. There's a general trend that we trust ourselves and our friends much more. We lose confidence in trusting in brands, in authorities, and well-designed enterprises actually deliver on their promises. That's one of the principles that we are using. So you don't actually need to tell everyone how trustworthy you are all the time. If you are an employee, our current systems are actually actively rewarding you for not being loyal to your current organization. You will earn more if you change. And this is also a symptom of strangely designed enterprise systems or enterprise behaviors. Also, as a customer, this is the case. Often you are rewarded if you are a new customer, and if you're an old loyal customer, you don't even get the new better packages, for example, from your telco. Enterprise awkwardness can also render in the space in the office. For example, this is actually in a bathroom in an organization, and it's a department, probably the CSR department, kind of bragging about how they switched off this light with this sign instead of just taking the light away. So in this case, they have just a need to tell the others that what they are doing and kind of justify their existence. So this is another symptom of awkwardness. This is me trying to get a package delivered in Paris. You see here that I didn't get it. It says FedEx tells me it's not available for pickup. I can request notifications, I can track more shipments, I can save the results, print, get help, and so on. Get help only means, for example, how to resize the browser font size or things like that. I cannot actually get in touch with them, ask for another delivery. There's no phone number, no button for that. I can see how it circles around Paris. And also what you might see here is that the center of the application is talking to me in English, and the top and the bottom, with the most visible element being something about cookies in French. This is why this is because one department chose to use the browser language, and the other one chose to use the IP address location. So awkwardness can lead to bad customer experiences and bad employee experiences as well. Another example is from the hotel industry this time. I think I booked once a hotel in the US, and now I'm getting lots of these kind of emails. Not a joke, we mean it. 50% off if I book tomorrow something in, I don't know, Chicago. I'm not in Chicago, and this is just not relevant. So enterprises, often if you want to determine, is your enterprise acting awkward right now, you can compare it to a person. So if this would be a person sending you this stuff, behaving like this, is it normal or is it weird? The reason is often complexity and also a kind of control freak behavior. So this is an example from a hotel chain, one of 1,500 standard operating procedures that they are using. And this is the one for saying hello to a group when they arrive at the reception. And we went into the field and we checked, and they say, we have so much turnover, we can't teach our staff is only there for maybe 3 months. They will not learn the 1,500 procedures. Also, we don't have time for this. We actually have to take care of our hotel. And we often see this gap between the headquarters and the field, between the customer and the organization, between the employees and the management. So if we want to change that, if we want to design enterprises in the way that they actually work and that they make sense, we found that there are a lot of things that we have to look at. So here you see a typical organization. We think an enterprise is larger than the legal entity, because without the suppliers, the partners, especially the customers, it wouldn't work. And we found many aspects appearing that might be relevant or might not be relevant for any given challenge. So the enterprise design framework at its core is a collection of these aspects, and they are kind of appearing randomly when you look at the enterprise, depending on who looks at what moment, and what is their background and their priorities. Just in a kind of one-off example of an enterprise that we think is kind of well designed, even though not without problems, of course. So you see here that Airbnb actually has a very strong identity. They rebranded to talk about how they are about places and love and so on. So there you see the 3 icons on the left. So it's about identity, it's about communication, it's about turning that into visible signs. Airbnb is a very impressive enterprise, being much younger than a comparable hotel group. They don't own any property, as opposed to hotels, like in this case 8,000 hotels. They achieve their 30 billion revenue with just 2,000 employees, which means also they are not a startup anymore. It's what we call a scale-up, which is clearly a complex enterprise. And they make a lot of design decisions in order to make this work that way. So So if you look at how Airbnb works, you see, for example, they offer things that are rather unique, or rather they allow it, unique experiences to appear. It's about the uniqueness of places, of experiences. They look at functions that you want to use and interactions with the users, like sharing, saving listings. If you, for example, if you don't get a place, they will email you immediately with new alternatives. It's about information architecture, making it available. It's about understanding what the users actually want, what is different about a business traveler to a private, like a group trip, for example. It's about getting the content right. Airbnb is also one of the examples where there's a designer on the founding team, and it almost failed until they introduced very good photos and sourced professional photography to actually make people want to book and overcome the trust threshold. So all of these decisions have to be made and have to be navigated, because something decided in one aspect means that you also change the others. And Airbnb is actually one of the examples of an enterprise that is maybe even a little bit too successful. Here you see their impact on Tel Aviv, which is the Airbnb city, according to statistics from the Israeli newspaper Haaretz here. So you see here that 8,000 apartments, so 4.5% are rented out on Airbnb. Half of the tourists are staying in one. 800 renters are holding all the keys, and is growing massively. And it's starting to have, like many of these very successful scale-ups, Airbnb is now under threat of being heavily regulated in Tel Aviv and some other cities. But yeah, an enterprise that actually has success through design. When we talk about design, we often talk about, it kind of naturally comes to design thinking. So design thinking is a important, I would say, neighbor of enterprise design, because it made for the first time management aware that you can use design, as it says here on HBR, not only for products, but also for strategy and change. And even Gartner says that our cousin discipline, enterprise architecture, 40% of them this year will focus on design-driven architecture. They don't really say what that is, but they talk about design thinking, then saying it's about the customer, putting the customer at the center, designing solutions for them, as in service design or product design, and then linking that to the traditional architecture pieces. And what I'm here to tell you today is there's a lot of evidence we got that this does not work. If you look at the architecture, at the systems, at the what they call the traditional business pieces afterwards, your fancy design might just not work. And this is why many design initiatives or design-led initiatives actually fail. So the enterprise design framework is designed to make you to make this part of the design work itself, to look at the enterprise as part of the design research, the design, the conceptual work, the creative work, the implementation work, and not do this kind of waterfall approach, first designing a solution and then linking it into the existing environment. Also, there has been a lot of backlash on design thinking. People sometimes think it's about rooms that look like this, like Post-its. So we use Post-its as well, but Post-its are not the solution. You will not get a good design by using them automatically. I put two links in here. One is a talk by Natasha Jen from a design studio about how design thinking sometimes doesn't work if you think it is the magic bullet of creativity on Post-its. But there's also a very thoughtful article from Don Kolko on where it comes from, where it makes sense, how and how to do it properly. And we kind of add to that the enterprise, and we think that a lot of trouble with the enterprise, as I showed before, a lot of awkwardness, a lot of failure, is related to our approach to see the enterprise, which is still coming from another time where everything was about scaling systems top down, making work repetitive, and planning everything. And we have a lot of models that still show that enterprises are designed like this. So many managers have this in their mind when they make design decisions, how to design the enterprise. So it is basically this value chain. You have these departments like marketing, service. It's designed as a chain, and then for some reason on top of that, in this graphic, you have the support activities, HR, technology, procurement, and so on. And the disciplines that we find interested in enterprise design, doing enterprise design, also where we source the best enterprise designers from, they kind of are incompatible with that view. They don't fit in one of these boxes. By doing it well, you will by kind of automatically run into a lot of walls, and you want to question this model. So that just as a background story. So we actually ventured to have a definition, even though definitions are a little difficult. So we like this definition of design is the rendering of intent. So you have an entrepreneur and an entrepreneurial environment with a certain intent, and to realize an ambitious endeavor. So combining rendering the intent, making it happen, and the ambitious endeavor you have in mind, you get enterprise design. And you have to design all the structures, systems, behaviors to realize it, and also to establish all the relationships to employees, customers, and all other stakeholders. So we did a survey very recently on how our community defines enterprise design, and you see there there's a link at the bottom if you're more interested in the definitions and also in the modeling part that I will talk about later. So what isn't enterprise design? It's not UX design where you say we need a new app. It's not measuring net promoter score, asking would your friends recommend this and calling it customer experience. It's not just making a business design, like a new business model, or using the business model canvas. It's not redesigning your processes or IT systems according to requirements falling from the sky. It's also not a design thinking workshop, brainstorming ideas. It's not organization chart redesign. It's also not traditional brand style guides or kind of the new design systems where you manage your colors and your buttons and so on, but you don't look actually into how the organization behaves, what it offers and how it operates. And it's also not making, for example, cups or calendars saying be agile or how to write emails. So we have a lot of challenges that enterprise design seeks to address, from generally designing a future state, engaging the community, designing customer experience and products and services, designing the operational part to actually deliver on that, designing the internal workings to empower and engage your teams, and also to design the enterprise so that it can actually deal with a disruptive environment. These are very generic challenges, but this is what we often hear from our clients and practitioners, what it is all about. So how to do it? We have this theory: enterprise design enterprises need to do kind of two things. They need to innovate, which rather simplified means create something new and adopt it. And they need to transform, which is changing what they already have in place, be it internal or external. And what is design doing? Design is good at uncovering opportunities through research and insights and experimentation and developing solutions. And it's a complex system, which means this Lawrence graphic here is kind of accurately representing how enterprises go through this space, which is a tiny change of variable at the beginning or at some crucial point can send the entire thing into a new direction. And in our case, that also means that as enterprise designers, that means that if we make a model and it resonates with someone who has a decision to make at a crucial point, we can actually influence the large organization, the large enterprise in its ecosystem, being just a little designer and being maybe running just a little workshop, because it's often very much about managing how people think and how they talk. So the framework is designed to navigate this space from opportunities to solutions and innovation to transformation. And we often have to navigate the enterprise at different scale. We have the tangible part, which is the things, the environments, physical or digital, everything you see, which is kind of local and isolated, but it's incredibly important because this is where the enterprise actually happens in the, for example, in one store, or someone having one product, unpacking one product, or getting one email. And then we have the big picture outside where we have all the disruptive innovation, the integrated solutions, system-wide change, and also big opportunities where we talk about what is our identity, how does everything work as an architecture, what is our experience, what is the experience, what is the role we play in people's lives. And then we have scales in between. How do we interact? What do we use? What do we do with technology? How do we operate? What services should we offer? Who are the actors we are addressing? What touch points do we have with them? All of these questions. So the framework gives you at its core something called the stack. The stack is designed to enable you to navigate that space from the big picture down to the rendering. It has been introduced in 2012 when we published the book Intersection. And yes, the book basically describes this part of the framework because it came out in 2012. The framework has been extended, so the framework I'm presenting today is version 3. If you look at the website, that's still version 2, so it's a preview. And the full framework now looks like this. So you have the stack to make sense of the enterprise and talk about it. And then for each of the corners, whether you want to find opportunities for innovation or map scenarios for transformation or develop innovative solutions or change the system, we have a tool for each of them that relies on the stack as a common language. And I will go through that a little bit more. We also have an approach in 7 phases. It's very similar to design thinking or design sprint methodologies, just saying, yeah, you engage your stakeholders, you discover and do research, you make conceptual work, you experiment, do sprints and prototyping to validate, you implement what you need to implement, and you measure whether you are delivering on the results. And as we go through this, these phases, we move through the framework components and the enterprise design space. So first component, the stack, really designed as this language to make sense of the enterprise, look at it from different directions, find in the complexity of the different aspects, opportunities, concerns, ideas, constraints to be taken into account, ask the right questions, basically. Get a chunk of it out that you can manage, cast a team around it, and then work on it iteratively and incrementally in this continuous kind of fashion. So the stack features, as I said, 5 layers and 20 aspects. Usually for a workshop, we say we can look at 3. For a project, we can look at 5. And for a large program, we can maybe look at 10. So it often is really also about what not to look at. But generally, we can say you have to, most of the time, you have to start at the top. Even if you get a briefing that is like, we need an app, you ask why, and maybe you get to an experiential or architectural reason behind it. You start there, and you want to get down to the rendering, to the operational, what should we actually bring to life and make real for people to touch and use. And then in between, choosing which aspects should we look at in order to make the best decisions. Is it maybe service designerly approach like touch points and services? Is it rather looking at the business models? Is it a functional or structural requirements approach because there's a lot of compliance involved? What are we actually designing here? Is it the organization? Is it information, how it is used and structured? Is it interactions? or is it, for example, technology? What should we do with blockchain? Going through it like a lift along the faces. You start at the top. You look to understand the anatomy or the moving parts. Basically, you frame this from a business, from a people, from a systems perspective. You define what you want to design. You experiment. Then you have prototypes that render the new enterprise. You validate, is it actually compatible with everything we wanted to achieve after framing? What do we need to change in the anatomy? What services do we need to implement? What kind of content do we need to produce? And what is the effect we want on the big picture? And is it actually delivering? This is the full approach. In coming back to post-its, in reality, you often kind of use the stack like this. It's really there to make you aware what you're talking about right now. What is the level that you're talking about? And the easiest way to use it is just by saying, okay, we have different colored post-its representing the different layers of the stack. Often it's more important to actually know which layer you are talking about. The first component where the stack is being used is the scan. Scan is a research tool. So we combine different research techniques, qualitative, quantitative, desk research of everything that they already have, baseline modeling, they being the enterprise client, internal or external, also looking at data and looking really to have this 360-degree view or tracing of the enterprise, looking at the behavior, what are people doing, what processes, what analytical data do we have, what do people want to do, what do they say they want to do, the structures, understanding what the domain is, borrowing there also heavily from domain-driven design and concept modeling, mapping what needs to be mapped, what is the enterprise really about, and also the intent. So talking to all the stakeholders, where are they going and why, what are the objectives, and also what can we draw from unstructured data. Just as the stack, it's not about doing everything. It's about actively choosing what to look at and what to ignore right now and having a reason for that. I will concentrate just now on the quantitative bit because I'm, as business analysts, I guess most of you are familiar with the qualitative research, the data analysis, and the desk research part. So we have one tool that is a survey where we just turn the stack into rather simple questions. Like, for example, in services, we ask good services or bad services. And if many people actually click in the survey bad services and not many people click good services, then we might want to look into services as an aspect. We can do that with customers, employees, and managers, and also establish a gap. This is a research technique that has been developed by Jerry McGovern, who I already mentioned, and we usually combine it with his signature approach, which is top tasks. So it's a survey where we ask employees or customers what tasks matter to you and which ones don't. And usually we get this distribution where we have 4 core tasks. This is an example for the OECD. And if we design the enterprise around doing these tasks well, then we already are a big step forward. And often this quantitative data is different from the qualitative data that we get. Here's some example from a self-study kit that we give people before a design sprint. Like, what are you working on? What does your workplace look like? What does your day look like? Who do you interact with? And then getting this data together, presenting it to people. In this case, it was a roadshow exhibition for our client Toyota Europe. Yeah, in this case, for example, we did a top task, seeing that emails is very time consuming, not very valuable. So addressing that in a new enterprise design, finding better way to collaborate and to communicate would be a nice task. Scenarios then is a planning and modeling and mapping approach. So there we have introduced a modeling language that uses kind of the same elements as I already talked about in the scan, and then we have mappings. Some are default mappings that people already know how to use, and some are custom mappings that we develop together with the teams from clients and partners. But really, again, the idea is, instead of saying, okay, I use a service blueprint because I'm a service designer, or I use BPMN because I'm a process designer, we say, what aspect should we model in order to model the right thing and ask the right questions and develop the right views. So the stack becomes a language to navigate the different mappings as kind of one model. And we use the same structure as before. So we have entities, activities, and qualities as modeling elements. And with that, we can do simple maps, which is just one aspect, or composite maps showing how different aspects are related. And with that, we can model different things like strategy and products, customer experience, employee experience, service design, business, processes, organization, depending on what is the challenge at hand and how can we effectively think about it. So yeah, in more detail, the language looks like this. We have the vocabulary, so we have activities for everything that is behavioral, qualities for everything that is aspirational, and entities for everything that is structural. We add the aspects, and we have three very simple relations, which is something is related to something, something flows, and something is inside something else. And with that, we also did a survey, and here's again the link to the survey results if you want more details. But basically, we asked our ecosystem, what mappings do you make? And we see here that journey maps, process maps, business model canvas, and capability maps are the top models. So we support those. We also support all the other ones with a color. So here's an example of a simple model. It's an ecosystem map for a education system. You can also use this template for a stakeholder map, and it just takes one aspect, which is actors, and one element, which is entities. And then we have composite models. Like this is an example template for insurance. We have the customer experience on top, so experience. We have the journey with the touch points and the services we offer, and then we can map that to delivery as capabilities, and then further decompose that into processes and maybe IT systems. We can also link it to other things like interaction design or organizational responsibilities. Or to understand the customer experience, we can also link it to things like content or prototypes that then are in the rendering level. We can express things like personas using, again, mostly one aspect, which is in this case people, and look at this persona, what they want, what they don't want, what are their tasks and the tools, and also link that to another aspect, which is actors. So this persona might represent two actors, business passenger of our fake airline and loyalty scheme member. And then we can make, in this case for our fake airline enterprise, we can make a persona library with different personas. We can then, for each of them, make experience maps, again, using the same vocabulary. What is the experience? What are they doing? We can add things like data from surveys or analytics to make the models more semantic and see where are the pain points, where are we doing well, what are the opportunities. And we can use the same language for something entirely different but related, which is in this case, for example, a capability map for a national healthcare provider. So there we use qualities instead of entities, because it's how well we are doing what, and we can say, okay, how mature is which capability? Is it doing well, or should we do something? And yeah, because it's something we often call the business model canvas the bad English of all the disciplines that we have in the room. Everyone is using it, but slightly differently. But we can use it, for example, in this case, to make sense of our airline. And just the idea of the language is also just to reuse elements. So as opposed to other languages like Archimate or BPMN, it's not about being perfectly accurate or perfectly readable or perfectly correct, but kind of being a little bit bad at all of them, but linking together the different models that we are making and making the connections visible. And we can do that also using modeling tools. So Qualiware is the first tool that actually supports the modeling language. So we can have all the elements in a database. We can track and trace all the connections, bring in the data, make it accessible to the organization on the web, and so on. But there's also, I mean, I'm showing it in Google Slides right now, so there's also a Google Slides version and a PowerPoint version. We usually do not use these kind of models to talk to senior stakeholders. There we would go back to the design tools and say, okay, how can we represent this in a way that makes sense to the stakeholders graphically? It's more about all the designers, analysts, architects, consultants, and more involved stakeholders making sense of the enterprise together. So this is just an example of a modeling output for a UN agency where we looked at what is their value chain, what are the digital touch points they have, what services do they provide, who do they work with, and bringing all that together on one slide. So if you're more interested in more about this project or modeling in general, there's a talk at the 2014 Intersection Conference and also a case study on our website. Or you could make models like this, in this case, a Deutsche Telekom project where we have how do we organize ourselves in order to change our processes, how to deliver, in this case, our social intranet, and what is the goal then for our employees, our users. So EDML is not meant to replace something like Archimate, BPMN, UML, or also these kind of visual mappings, but it is an additional tool to link together and make bridges. We often use it together with design sprints, enterprise design sprints. So this is basically the collaborative workshop. Design sprints are a very powerful tool. They have been developed for startups developing products, which is a lot of things we can actually take and adapt. I talked together with my colleague Tomomi about scaling design sprints for enterprises at a conference, and there's a recording if you want to watch it. But generally, we say we have different kinds of enterprise design sprints. We have ones where we engage people. We have ones where we work rather on strategic level. We have experimentation ones where we look at what should be built, what should we deliver, and validate that. And then we have realization sprints where we actually know what we want to do, but we want to get everyone into one room to decide how. And this has an impact on who's in the room, what aspects do we need to represent, what stakeholders do we need to invite, how much time can we take. So engagement, for example, normally is a lot of people, but they don't have so much time, so it's rather 2 days. Realization can be 5 days, like in the Google version, or even stretched over 2 weeks. Can also be partly remote. Strategy usually is shorter, fewer people, because we want the key decision makers. Experimentation is kind of in the middle. We have a database of models and activities, and again, using the stack as a navigation aid. So depending on the sprint challenge, deciding what should we do during the sprint. And then you see here, for example, we have one activity called fill out a canvas. So what kind of canvas we want to use? Is it the lean canvas, the business model canvas, the non-profit business model canvas, the service canvas? Depends really, or do we make up our own canvas? So there, the modeling language basically gives us the freedom and vocabulary to model what we want to model. The models then are usually we model a lot already before the sprints, then we check them out and we turn them into physical models, like for example on these kind of boards. And then after the sprint, we make changes to the models. Just a few impressions of how enterprise design sprints look like. So we have usually a session relaying all the discovery insights to the participants, or as in this case with the Deutsche Telekom Design Sprint Camp, getting 12 teams to understand the common challenge they are working on, or in this case from Toyota, getting all the relevant data from the scan into the room, putting them on the wall, working on different kinds of challenges and For example, rendering level prototyping does not necessarily mean an app or something like that. It can be even just a sentence. For example, here 3 people discussing their strategy and how to phrase it, and then the output to be validated is, do people actually understand this sentence? Working with prototyping, for example, Legos, or making design principles, or making kind of blueprints, again using the stack together, well, turning the stack into post-its and making people map and relate different things to each other. And then very importantly also communicating sprint results. So another roadshow in this case for Toyota, where we actually took the name of the initiative called Fast Forward very literally and put it into the entrance hall to engage the enterprise and make them think about their future. And also in the telecom example, making an exhibition where all the different teams at the end walk around, give each other feedback, and look at how can they realize the outcomes of the sprints together. So as I said, then we take the outcomes. Of course, we make pictures of them, but and videos very importantly, but also use them to make more formal models like a service blueprint, and then this can be checked back into the EDML if we have a repository, into the repository, and shared with the wider organization and linked to all the other elements of the architecture. Also very important, using collaboration tools to engage the rest of the organization. Or one thing that we always do with more complex models, there's a big risk in sprints that everyone in the room for the next 3 days remembers what was the outcome, but the wider organization cannot really relate to the models. So taking your phone, making a short video, putting that on the intranet to explain, for example, what the new meeting and workshop experience that they envision really looks like, and how that relates to the Lego that they put on the board. So lastly, but I will only touch on this very briefly because my clock says I only have 2 minutes left. The enterprise design system, there we really try to take everything and enable teams to transform themselves rather than working on the solutions directly or on the problems directly. So having different kinds of systems that you need in order to redesign your enterprise, engaging people, for example, on a social workplace or externally on your Facebook group or Twitter, where basically the enterprise discusses who they are, where they want to go, what it is all about, tying that to intelligence systems in the anatomy, tracing what's happening, having systems of reference like classic ones like ERP or CRM, but also new ones like shared ledgers on a blockchain, giving people systems of design so that they have the stuff they need in order to design the enterprise or their chunk of enterprise in a good fashion. And also very importantly, and this is something that we often see missing from business analysis or business architecture approaches, tying this to the rendering and giving people actual basically physical or digital tools and user experiences of how the enterprise actually renders in reality, and making that part of the design. So here's just an example of how everything fits together in a commercial enterprise at different levels. So on the bottom you have things like projects or MVP sprint things. We go through the 7 steps always, as I said before. We use EDML models to make sense of everything as we go through the different steps. And then the projects or MVPs become part of the bigger picture of products or programs, where we do the same but slightly different, making slightly different models, more strategic, more abstract. And then on the enterprise level, we do the same across all the products and services across the entire organization, all the departments and teams, and make sure that everything fits together, and use the different tools, the scan, the scenarios, sprint, and system as we go along in this kind of fractal way. So it can be sprints, can be projects or initiatives, or can be large programs. But basically, we are always going through these steps and in different paces And you see here also the little dots from our survey. So things that people consider top models like journey maps, capability maps, process maps are in here, or business model canvas, but also models that we make up in order to represent what this enterprise needs when they are doing enterprise design, like a representation of strategic topics, a map of what they invest in, looking at what impact they want to have, or different kinds of validation outputs to measure. Yeah, as I said, if you're interested in this, please join us or get in touch. And that's it. Thank you so much for your attention. And I hope that there are questions. I think the chat is blinking already.
Thanks so much, Milan. I think you shared a lot of information and new information as well. So there's a lot to digest as well. But one of the questions I have is, I think you kind of touched upon that during your presentation. Wanted to hear from your experience, can you give us some example of how business analysis professionals get involved within the enterprise design architecture framework? Are there specific steps within that framework where they really get involved into?
Well, I would, so as I said before, it's really a practice from our point of view, not necessarily yet a very well-defined role. It is definitely becoming a discipline, but everyone can do it. Now, depending on your background, usually you get involved more in different parts of the process and of the framework. So if you look at this example adoption chart here, there are some models that are kind of familiar, I guess, to business analysis professionals, and others are a little bit more coming from the service and UX design space. Now, you could just say, well, then I concentrate on the business analysis bit. I do those, and my colleague service designer or UX designer will do the other ones. But the point of having this framework and having one toolkit that links those different things together is that we make sure that they are coherent, that we have something to talk. And it also means that, for example, if a design perspective is missing in your practice, you can fill it yourself by expanding from your business analysis toolbox, and we will talk about that in November about the BABOK, into space that is usually more coming from a more design or more business or even more technical point of view, and just do it. We are always a fan of people just giving it a shot rather than building a little corner or a little silo around what you perceive as really your core domain, which is also reflected in these design thinking concept of T-shaped competency profiles. So you should have a broad upper part of the T, and part of the framework is really also give you the tools to be confident in, for example, through examples, to make mappings and models that make sense and address challenges that are maybe a little outside of the comfort zone of your original background discipline.
Mm-hmm. So you shared a lot of templates, and those were really interesting for some of our audience. And the question that came out was, where do I find those templates?
Yeah. So the version 3 part of the framework is not published yet. So this was basically a preview, but the answer is basically get in touch. So there's this little form that we put here where we ask what you want to do, and then everything is basically available. I mean, of course, we also share the slides and the recording of the webinar, but as this is not yet a real, I would say, a standard product, and I'm actually not sure if it will be ever, because we always are rather a fan of bringing people into the community than just throwing tools over the fence. So I would just ask them to get in touch, basically.
And then I would also say you are an author. I believe you have written a book on enterprise. You have a book on enterprise design architecture.
Yes.
And this book is Yes, that's right, intersection. For those that are IIBA members, you can actually find that book within the online library, which is accessible to you as a member. So it is more on the version 2, if I'm not mistaken, because you're still the version 3 is still not out yet. But it's also a great way to get familiar with the concept.
Right.
We have a few more minutes for questions. Feel free to add your questions within a question box. I'll give a couple of minutes. Is there anything else Milan, you would like to share, or a message you'd like to share to the audience?
Well, as always, after this kind of presentation, my head is spinning a little bit. But yeah, generally, so I mean, I shared in the very beginning what we think is wrong with today's enterprises. And partially we blame that on the existing approaches going not far enough. Service design fizzling out, customer experience being just about measuring whether people like you, and not whether you actually solve their, address their top tasks and whether you're actually useful as an enterprise. Outdated views on organization design, seeing the enterprise like a machine, even though it isn't. Seeing branding as messaging instead of, having an identity that is coherent with your purpose and your vision. So we really think that we can take everything we know from business analysis, enterprise architecture, user experience design, service design. We can we basically have superpowers. It's a phrase I heard from a presenter at the Enterprise UX conference that was recently in the US, and we just have to be bold and shift the enterprises to be better, to be less awkward, to be more useful. I think this is the most important message that I want to convey.
Be bold, yes. We actually received one more question. Is it necessary to begin at the top and work down, or can the approach be bottom up?
Yes, it can. So, the traditional design domain, the one that if you study industrial design or graphic design, for example, is rendering level. Just finding the slide with the stack. Usually your briefing as a traditional designer will be rendering level. As a interaction service designer or even analyst or architect, it will be often design space level. And we say, yeah, normally it is the best way to start from the big picture. You have an entrepreneur with a project with an intent, and you go from there, and you do an open 360-degree scan in order to find challenges worth tackling rather than responding to what stakeholders have in mind or executives have in mind. Should be a good challenge. But often that's not the case. So what do we do when we want to start from the bottom? So let's say, for example, we have an app or a piece of software or a product, and we want to do an enterprise design approach. What we do basically is we try to shift it from the design space rendering level up by asking, okay, what's the business model behind it? Who is using it, and not only, for example, the direct users, the customers of, if it is a customer-facing app, but also what is the role of employees, of partners, of everyone? What are the touch points? What content is represented there? For example, also other channels like email or things that are outside the traditional scope of this assignment, and then asking, okay, what on an experience level, for example, why are we doing that? What is our role today in the people's lives that we are addressing? What is the role tomorrow? And it's not really changing the scope. It is just clarifying why we are doing it. That enables us to shift it up to the big picture level so that we can actually depart from a strategic viewpoint. And this can be done in the process So if you start down at the rendering level, you can basically do it inversely. So when you reach the definition phase where you actually decide what you want to do, this is where you should have an idea on a big picture level of why you are doing it. And this is very much also in line with the agile principles that every team member in a Scrum or in a scaled agile team should actually know and be aware of and make decisions accordingly to their shared vision of what it is they are actually working towards on a big picture level, rather than, for example, designing according to isolated detailed specification documents without knowing why.
Great. Great. Well, thank you so much again, Milan, for sharing your knowledge. We really appreciate it. Sadly, this is the end of the webinar. Yeah. So thank you everyone for attending today's webinar. Have a great day or great evening or afternoon, wherever you are. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Liva.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.